My mum tells a story about something that happened when she was a teenager, involving a friend of hers. Let's call her friend Lisa. One night, my mum and Lisa were sitting on the roof of Lisa's house when they noticed a bright light in the sky. The next thing they knew, the light was gone. At first, nothing seemed unusual. They both assumed only about 15 minutes had passed. But when they checked the time, nearly 3 hours were missing. Neither of them could account for where that time had gone. My mum couldn't remember anything that happened during those missing hours, and whenever she tried to talk to Lisa about it afterwards, Lisa would shut down the conversation immediately. I don't know, just drop it. These were the only answers she'd give. A few months later, my mum moved away and lost contact with Lisa completely. Nearly 10 years passed before they saw each other again. When they finally reunited, my mum immediately noticed that something about Lisa seemed different. She described her as distant, almost dreamlike. Not detached in a negative way, but strangely peaceful, as if she'd discovered something that made her completely at ease with the world. After talking for a while, Lisa unexpectedly brought up the incident on the roof. My mum admitted she still couldn't remember anything, but Lisa could. At first, they came back in fragments, confusing flashes and disconnected pieces. She said that was why she refused to discuss it when they were younger. The memories frightened her, and she didn't understand them herself. Over time though, the gaps filled in. Eventually, she claimed she remembered everything. Not just that first experience, but 3 other times she said she'd been taken afterward. According to Lisa, the first encounters were terrifying. She claimed she was somehow immobilised while beings performed invasive examinations and experiments on her. But the later encounters were different. She said they stopped treating her like a subject and began communicating with her. They didn't speak English or any human language she recognised, but somehow she could understand everything that they were saying. She couldn't speak back in their language, but she could understand them perfectly. According to Lisa, they told her many things. They spoke about space, about Earth, about humanity, and they made one prediction that deeply unsettled her. Years before it happened, they allegedly told her that she would become pregnant during a specific year, that the child would be stillborn, and that she would never be able to have children afterward. When that tragedy eventually occurred, Lisa became convinced that what she had experienced had been real. They also supposedly told her that my mother had been taken as well, during a separate incident that my mom has absolutely no memory of. My mom does admit that she has reoccurring nightmares about being abducted, but she's always believed they were dreams, nothing more. As the conversation continued, Lisa said that each time she met these beings, she became to understand what she called the truth. Naturally, my mom asked her what she meant. Lisa's answer was simple: you'll know eventually. When pressed further, she would only say that once she understood the truth, everything became wonderful. Over the years, my mom has seen Lisa several more times. She lives a normal life. She doesn't obsess over aliens. She doesn't spend her days talking about conspiracies or trying to convince people she's right. In fact, she rarely mentions any of it unless someone asks, which in some ways only makes the story stranger. Whether Lisa experienced something extraordinary, suffered from false memories, or simply found a way to make peace with events in her life, my mum still doesn't know. What she does know is that after all these years, Lisa has never changed her story, and she's never stopped insisting that one day everyone will understand the truth.
Alright, here it goes. The first time I ever saw anything unusual was when I was about 7 years old, living in Houston, Texas. Back then I had a habit of climbing on top of my mom's Suburban while it was parked in the driveway. I loved looking up at the night sky, and I'd sit there for long stretches of time, just staring at the stars and wondering what was out there. One night, while I was doing exactly that, I noticed an intensely bright light hovering over the tree line. It wasn't acting like a normal star, and it wasn't moving like an airplane. It just sat there, floating. I would estimate it was maybe about half a mile away. I remember getting excited and yelling for somebody to come outside and look at it, but nobody came. I ended up watching it by myself, and eventually the moment passed. At the time, I didn't really know what to think about it. After that, I didn't see anything else for years. Then March of 2008 happened. This experience took place somewhere between the 10th and the 15th of the month. I can't give an exact date because after everything happened, I spent the next 4 days barely sleeping and trying to come up with some logical explanation for what I had seen. No matter how hard I tried, nothing really fit. At the time, my mother lived in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, in a garden home community where all the houses looked almost exactly the same. They were all one story and visibility was excellent. You could see a long distance in every direction. One night, I was leaving a friend's house at exactly 4 in the morning. The sky was clear and full of stars. The second I stepped outside, something immediately caught my attention off to my left. I turned and saw a bright object floating silently through the sky. The light was unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was flashing and strobing blue, yellow, green, white, red and orange. The colours were incredibly vivid. I remember standing there completely frozen, just staring at it. I didn't want to run inside and get anyone, because I was afraid I'd miss something if I took my eyes off it. As I watched, it drifted in front of the moon behind my friend's house. That was the moment I was finally able to make out the outline of the object itself. The craft had a teardrop shape, almost like a sunflower seed. The light seemed to be originating from the upper half of the craft. The best way I can describe it is that it looked like some kind of light pattern was being transmitted upward from the object. There was also a thin, dark, smooth trail extending behind it. It looked almost like exhaust, but it disappeared maybe 50 to 75 feet behind the craft. The entire thing was no less than 400 yards away from me. Once it had passed beyond the moon, I finally snapped out of it and ran inside to grab someone. By the time we got back out, he could still hear it, but it was already too far away to make out any details. My house was only a few blocks away, so I headed home. When I got there, I stood in the driveway looking back in the same direction the first craft had come from. That's when I noticed 2 dim white lights slowly rising over the horizon. I immediately ran inside and woke my mother up. The two of us stood in the driveway, watching the sky for about 20 minutes. What happened next is something I'll never forget. 5 separate crafts flew over us. First came 2, then another 2, then a final single craft. Each group was separated by roughly 6 or 7 minutes. They were moving incredibly slowly, maybe around 20 miles per hour. They couldn't have been more than 200 feet above us, and the most shocking part was that they were completely silent. Looking up from underneath, each craft appeared to have 2 massive white lights. They were so bright and it was difficult to judge the size accurately. but I would estimate each light was somewhere around 30 to 40 feet across. Between those lights was this pulsating red light, repeatedly dimmed and brightened. Based on the scale of what I was seeing, I estimated each craft to be somewhere between 150 and 200 feet wide. The final craft was different. It flew lower and slower, and then it made a sound. To this day, that sound still haunts me. The best way I can describe it is digital. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't like an engine. It was something entirely different, and it was unbelievably loud. The craft made the sound twice. These objects had flown directly over us, and I honestly felt like the sound was some kind of acknowledgement. Whatever was controlling it seemed aware that we were watching, and it felt almost like a greeting. The moment it happened, I started crying. Absolutely no idea what I was looking at or what I had just heard. A couple of weeks later, I had another experience. It was around 2 in the morning, and I was standing in my driveway smoking a cigarette while listening to music on my iPod. At one point, I paused the music so I could turn on the backlight. I waved my hand over it a few times, creating a sort of strobe effect. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything arrive. But suddenly, I got that unmistakable feeling that someone was watching me. I looked up. Directly above me was a craft. It was trapezoid shaped with rounded edges and outlined by a dark red and black glow. The outline pulsed like flowing electricity. It wasn't high up either. The thing couldn't have been more than 75 feet above me. Honestly, I felt like I could have hit it with a rock. I stood there completely frozen. For 10 to 15 seconds, the craft hovered silently overhead. While it hovered, it moved in a smooth pattern from side to side and front to back. The movement reminded me of a floating training ball Luke uses in Star Wars. It never drifted more than about 20 feet from its original position. It was fascinating, terrifying, and completely unlike anything I had ever witnessed. Finally, I managed to raise one hand and wave it in a friendly way. The instant I did, the light pattern changed. Then it slowly drifted away behind my house. Looking back on that encounter, one thing has always stood out to me. The craft clearly knew that I could see it, yet it made no attempt whatsoever to hide. If anything, it almost felt like it wanted me to follow it. At the time, I was way too freaked out to even consider doing that. I've seen the same craft 3 more times since then. Once again in Tuscaloosa, once in Hoover, and once in Bessemer. The Hoover sighting happened while I was with friends at an apartment complex on top of a large hill overlooking the area. Across the overlook, I spotted a grey craft facing in my direction. The closest thing I can compare it to is a Hoth fighter from Star Wars. The second I noticed, the craft shot off silently to the right at an incredible speed. The sightings in Bessemer and Tuscaloosa were even stranger. Both times the trapezoid shape appeared as a solid white object in the sky. Then it stretched to roughly twice its original length before the lower portion seemed to shoot upward in the front section. The entire thing vanished so quickly it looked like something jumping to light speed. Over the years, I've also seen what I call streaks. They resemble shooting stars, but they are much lower in the sky and move more slowly. Unlike normal meteors, they appear in multiple colours and leave visible trails behind them. One particular strange event involved a dream. While living in Tuscaloosa, I had a dream where I couldn't see anything and couldn't hear anything. The only thing I could do was feel. I remember feeling like I was lying on something cold. I also remember feeling what seemed like rubber between my legs. The dream was unsettling because I knew there were stories from people who claimed to have had abduction experiences involving reproductive procedures. The next morning, I went outside to let the dog into the backyard. Our backyard was very small. Immediately, I noticed a perfectly white ring in the grass near the patio. It was probably 8 to 10 feet across. I showed it to my mother. She told me that she had heard a strange noise during the night that had actually woken her up, but she had dismissed it and gone back to sleep. Another experience happened in my driveway in Tuscaloosa near Shelton State Community College. One night I heard a strange static-like sound that reminded me of a jet. When I looked over toward the college, I saw what appeared to be a light blue slit standing vertically in the sky. It was enormous. I'd estimate it was roughly 200 yards long. White electrical currents seemed to be flowing from both sides of it. As I watched, around 25 white objects shot out from the slit, one after another at a rapid pace. Each one left behind the same type of trail I had seen before. When the final object exited, the bottom portion of the slit began moving upward until the opening completely closed. It emitted a strange sound and then vanished. Just like that, it was gone. I have also had numerous experiences involving orbs. Some appear as a solid illuminated spears moving across the sky. Others brighten to incredible intensity before fading away as they travel. After that first major sighting in 2008, I started researching heavily because I was desperate for answers. I understood that the number of experiences I was having wasn't normal, and honestly, I still can't explain why it happened to me. During my research, I came across the term contactee. These are people who are similar to abductees, except they report ongoing encounters over long periods of time. I have no idea why I've experienced so much. What I've shared here is only a fraction of everything that's happened. The only explanation I've been able to come up with is that maybe, because I acknowledged whatever I was seeing instead of ignoring it, somehow continued interacting with me. It's a gift and a curse. There are very few people I can talk to about these experiences without being laughed at or dismissed. One day, I'd like to try hypnotherapy and see if there are any details buried in my memory that I haven't uncovered yet. I'm grateful for the experiences, but at the same time I still don't really understand them. That's my story.
Like what you heard? Hit subscribe and like the video for more stories every Thursday and Sunday between 1800 and 2000 BST. And remember, curiosity opens doors better left closed.